Next on the agenda, we have Representative Vice Chair Purcell, House File 3940. Vice Chair Purcell, welcome. Would you like to move your bill?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Purcell moves House File 3940 before the committee. I see that you have a technical amendment. Would you like to explain the A1, please?
Mr. Chair, if I can have our nonpartisan staff explain, it's a very simple amendment.
Okay, Ms. Taylor.
Chair and members, it's very technical. It's just replacing commissioner with board since we're talking about the EQB and they do not have a commissioner.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries, and the amendment is approved. On to the Vice Chair, on to your bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm proud to present House File 3940, which would require an environmental impact statement, or EIS, for livestock projects over 10,000 animal units. When I last presented this bill, some of you may remember, there was the possibility of a 21,000 animal unit project, and now here we are 2 years later with a proposed dairy operation that would expand that operation to more than 26,000 animal units. For reference, the average size dairy, according to the last ag census, was less than 400 cows. In the late 1990s, this body debated our feedlot permitting rules. At that time, a dairy of 1,000 was a large herd and therefore requires an EAW. When our predecessors heard that debate, many didn't anticipate the size of projects we'd be permitting in Minnesota today, and with minimal environmental review. I'm bringing this bill forward again because it's past time to do something about the permitting of livestock projects on this scale. This bill isn't unrelated to the large volume water users bill you heard me present earlier this session. I dare to call the scale of a dairy operation a hyperscale dairy, just like we know that hyperscale data centers are a different beast than the data centers that we have today. We know Minnesotans deserve an additional level of scrutiny and transparency around any private operation of this size, even if it's an agricultural land use, not commercial or industrial like my previous bill. I have a deep concern for the remaining rural and farming families across our state who are in another set of farm crises today. Aging farmers, low commodity prices, tariffs, skyrocketing costs of inputs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And while they get squeezed, the single largest operator in our state continues to expand. For decades now, we've incentivized farmers to get big or get out, but let's also make sure we're protecting drinking water, runoff, and manure management on and nearby these enormous operations. Projects of this scale have the potential to have an outsized effect on our environment, and I think it's worth our time today to talk about whether they deserve an added level of review. In 2025, the state did 53 EAWs and only 3 environmental impact statements. The rolling 10-year average is 65 EAWs per year. Only 23% of the responsible government units held a public meeting for those EAWs. In the EIS process, it would be mandatory to get that local input. The EIS process also includes a pump test. Often these larger operations dig wells into deeper aquifers, but then pollute into more shallow aquifers where neighbors and legacy farms have their private drinking water come from. Luckily, this is very pertinent to today. Just this week, NPR ran a story on a proposed expansion of West River Dairy outside Morris in Stevens County to 18,855 head of cattle, nearly the amount that the Grand Casino Arena holds. That's the equivalent excrement of about 1.1 million humans, according to data from Cornell College calculator. And that will mean an incredible need for water, an incredible amount of animal waste, not to mention potential air pollution, living conditions for employees and the animals, land application of the manure, et cetera, et cetera. The timing is right for House File 3940. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is updating its feedlot rules to better manage pollution. And the Minnesota Department of Agriculture is presently reviewing the groundwater protection rule to ensure it protects drinking water from nitrates, something that the EPA found our state lacking doing to protect water for Minnesotans in my part of the state 2 years ago. House File 3940 tells Minnesotans that the legislature is moving in sync with our pollution control regulators to help protect Minnesota's environment and the well-beings of Minnesotans. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd be glad to turn it over to testifiers.
Thank you, Vice Chair Purcell. First on the list, I have Laura Schreiber. If you'd like to come forward, please. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Fisher and committee members, for the opportunity to testify. My name is Laura Schreiber. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Land Stewardship Project. We're a grassroots, membership-based nonprofit working to create a more sustainable and just farm and food system. On behalf of our members, I'm happy to share our strong support for Representative Purcell's bill, which would direct the Environmental Quality Board to automatically require that feedlots, whether new or existing, that are looking to expand to 10,000 animal units must undergo a mandatory environmental impact statement, or EIS. Currently, feedlots with 1,000 animal units or more must submit a environmental assessment worksheet, which according to the MPCA is a brief document designed to lay out a project's basic facts and assess its potential for significant environmental effects, which helps determine if an EIS is needed. Whereas an EIS differs in that it is a comprehensive review of the possible environmental, economic, employment, and sociological impacts of the proposed project. And most notably, a EIS must identify potential ways to minimize these impacts or propose alternatives to the project. It is a tool to gather information to truly understand the potential impacts of a project, considering a variety of factors. This information is especially necessary considering that Minnesota's existing 18,000 feedlots, only 6% are 1,000 animal units or more. A 10,000 animal unit feedlot or more is incredibly rare and deserves to have additional scrutiny. This type of comprehensive review would truly be for the biggest of the big operators. If we take the dairy example, as Representative Purcell has alluded to, in Minnesota, the average dairy herd size is 280 cows or 382 animal units, according to federal census data. In Minnesota, over the last 30 years, we have seen a steady decline of our dairy farms, with 9,000 dairy farms in 1995 to now we are just over 1,600 dairy farms in Minnesota. Small and medium-sized farms are being pushed out of the market due to inconsistent and often below cost of production milk prices and are being squeezed out by larger operations that can flood the market with cheaper to produce milk. Taking into account the economic impacts of a proposed feedlot of 10,000 animal units or more, when our farmers and our rural communities are already feeling the effects of consolidation on Main Street and in the viability of smaller farms, this information is truly critical to have and to inform our future decision-making. Just a few weeks ago, the DNR shared a presentation with this committee on groundwater sustainability, and notably, we don't even have all of our aquifers mapped in Minnesota, especially in western Minnesota. On average, a 10,000 animal unit dairy would use millions to potentially hundreds of millions of gallons of water per year. And especially as we are experiencing greater extreme weather and climate change, having this comprehensive review that an EIS provides is truly critical. Today, actually, Carrie Rudden, who is a dairy farmer in Stevens County, wanted to speak with you, but she also, for her off-farm job, works in an accounting office, so you can assume it's a pretty busy time for her, so she was not able to step away, but she's a retired dairy farmer, and now they raise beef cattle. But if she was here, she would tell you that this bill is needed now. As Rep. Purcell shared, Carrie is in Stevens County, where West River Dairy and Morris in Stevens County is looking to expand and add 11,000 cows, which would increase their dairy herd size to 18,555 cows, or more than 26,000 animal units. An EIS is a tool to have a full scope accounting of potential impacts to our communities and the environment, economic and sociological impacts. And we need that information, especially for these biggest of the big. So thank you for the time to testify, and I really urge the committee to think about and support this bill for the information for our farmers and for future environment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, I have Ann Schwagerl. I Excuse me if I didn't get it right there. Thank you for taking that time to be here today. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairs Fisher and Heinzman. See, I can do last names wrong, too. For the record, my name is Ann Schwagel. I am a farmer in Big Stone County in western Minnesota. I am here on behalf of Minnesota Farmers Union in support of House File 3940. I serve as the Vice President of MFU, which is a grassroots, membership-driven organization representing family farmers in rural communities across the state. Our members include family dairies, many who are struggling to stay in business while they shoulder milk prices well below their cost of production. They care deeply about both environmental stewardship and the long-term viability of rural economies. We support this legislation because it recognizes a simple reality. The scale of livestock operations in Minnesota is changing, and our review processes need to keep pace. Projects of unprecedented size, like the proposed mega dairy expansion in Stevens County, next door to me, bring potential impacts that go beyond what was envisioned when Minnesota's current livestock feedlot rules were developed decades ago. These regulations should be scaled. Large companies can afford to hire compliance staff that a family-sized operation can't. An environmental impact statement is not about stopping projects. It's about ensuring that we fully understand their environmental, economic, and social consequences before they move forward. From our members' perspectives, there are several key concerns. First, water use and water quality. Large-scale livestock operations require significant continuous water withdrawals. Farmers in the surrounding area need confidence that shared groundwater resources will remain sufficient and protected. Second is risk. As livestock is consolidated into fewer, larger facilities, the consequences of disease outbreaks, natural disasters, or system failures can become more significant, not just for the operation itself, but for neighboring farms and communities. Third is rural economic impacts. As you heard from a previous testifier, Minnesota has lost nearly half of its dairy farms in the past decade, even as the number of dairy cows has remained steady. This points to rapid consolidation that can reshape local economies in ways that deserve careful analysis. Finally, public trust. An EIS provides transparency and a meaningful opportunity for community input. When projects are this large and this different, Minnesotans expect and deserve that level of review. House File 3940 ensures that when projects exceed certain thresholds, we take a closer look before moving forward. That's a reasonable, measured approach that supports both responsible development and strong rural communities. Thank you for your time and consideration, and for Representative Purcell's leadership here.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, I have Darren Broughton. Welcome to the committee. Thanks for taking the time to be here. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, members. Excuse me, Darren Broughton, Executive Director of Minnesota Agri-Growth. Do appreciate the opportunity to testify on this bill. Most Minnesotans have an image of a typical dairy farm. And mine is my grandparents' farm with its 60 head of Holsteins just outside Pine Island. They farmed there for 40 plus years until they decided to sell when he retired to his neighbor and friend next door who had 400 cows. It is these memories and images that has tainted our ability to really recognize that raising livestock, and in this case dairy, has evolved since the 1980s and 90s. House File 3940 fails to recognize that evolution. Instead, it relies on those memories and feelings rather than the science and the data. Like the 1,000 animal unit threshold for feedlot permits, which was established by the legislature almost 30 years ago, the proposed 10,000 threshold for this EIS is based upon those memories and feelings and not the science. No science or evidence shows that a barn with 10,000 cows poses a greater environmental risk than a barn with 9,990. It is a made-up number by the legislature. If we looked at the science and data, we would see that larger barns and farming operations have more requirements for manure management, water use or reuse, and climate mitigation than smaller farms. A stream or river in Minnesota is substantially more likely to be polluted by a city's wastewater treatment plant that overflows during an extreme weather event than by a large feedlot. That's not my data, that is state agency data. House File 3940 also fails to recognize that the MPC already has tools in place to protect our waters. The feedlot EAW now includes information about water use and reuse, aquifers, and conservation measures, and all of that is available for public comment. The MPC also has the ability to issue an individual feedlot permit to an operator versus a general feedlot permit. The proposed West Dairy permit is an individual permit and would be the most stringent permit in the state of Minnesota. It would require the use of a 60-inch liner for liquid manure storage compared to the 24 inches in the general permit. It requires Riverview to notify the MPCA 3 days before manure is land applied. The general feedlot permit has no such requirement. From stricter water usage to manure management, the MPCA has proposed strict safeguards on our waters. And AgriGrowth will work with any legislator to codify and strengthen the MPCA's authority to issue individual feedlot permits. House File 3940 is weaponizing our state's environmental review and laws to address economic concerns. I want to remind folks that an EIS stands for an environmental impact statement, not an economic one. If the legislature is concerned about the economics of dairy and cattle farms of all sizes, then we should have a thoughtful discussion on it, and we should have a thoughtful discussion on it. But using environmental review and laws to address economics of an industry is inappropriate. Let's use the science and data, not our fading memories, to make better decisions to help Minnesota farmers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, I have Lucas Sostrom. Welcome back. Thank you for being here. Please
Thank you, Mr.
introduce
Chair.
yourself again and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Lucas Shellstrom, Executive Director of the Minnesota Milk Producers Association. Chair Fisher and members of the committee, we stand in opposition to House File 3940. First, I want to reference a few things that have come out through testimony before reading my remarks. It's been mentioned a couple times, the single largest dairy expanding. I just want to remind the committee last time this bill or version of this bill came forward, we had multiple letters from multiple farms come forward. One thing about dairy, and this affects dairy the most because when you do math, cows are actually bigger than the other animals affected through this, so therefore cows are more likely to be at permits this size. But dairies, if they are built in the state today, and if they are built in the state for the last 20 years, that means they have a willing buyer who knows very well their environmental, their social, their economic outlook and impact. And very likely, the willing buyer of their milk is going to be someone who's familiar and used to that operation. So it shouldn't be a surprise, I think, to the committee that our well-run dairies, and I mean that in every sense of the word, are the ones that the buyers are coming to and saying, hey, why don't you do that again? Why don't you see if you can find another spot to do that? But again, I want to mention that it's one dairy has been mentioned here today that's up for permit, but multiple letters from multiple farms who would love to be at levels that would be impacted by this bill were submitted last time. Second, one of our issues, I drive 2 hours when I get to come down here and sit in front of you, and I hope many of you take the chance when you get the opportunity to drive 2 hours back and see some of our dairies. I've had the fortunate opportunity through my different professions to see animal units of this scale of several species. Sheep in Colorado, cattle in Kansas, dairy cattle in Idaho and California and Arizona, all well-run operations, many times in complete deserts. Minnesota, we have soil, we have water resources, we have things that other states don't and vice versa, and we manage them extremely well. And so when we point to things like we've never had something of that size before, well, within our borders, that's correct, but I think some of the laws that were referenced and some of the requirements referenced before may be big reason for that. If you can do this in a desert, you can very well do it in soil that can capture the nutrients and grow a crop on it. As you all know, this bill mandates environmental impact statements for all animal feedlots over 10,000 animal units. While this may be framed as a targeted measure, we have seen this regulatory approach fail in very different ways for one of our neighbors. In North Dakota, they used to have rigid restrictions on how family members could farm together. Second cousins could not partner up in livestock operations, and that was intended to protect the family farm. This has resulted, at least in part, to them having 17 dairies left in North Dakota. The infrastructure there is gone, and they are excited to see new dairies coming back into North Dakota, and I can say that of some of my friends of all sizes of dairies. The transition from an EAW, an environmental assessment worksheet, to a mandatory EIS is a major disruption to the current regulatory framework. EAWs are already required for over 1,000 animal units. Moving to a mandatory EIS adds layers and layers of review that negatively impact project timelines and costs without necessarily providing additional environmental protection. One other thing referenced here was that farms of this size will pollute into shallow aquifers. I take strong issue with that. First of all, over 1,000 animal units, it is the non-pollutant discharge elimination system. That means pollution is not allowed, and they need to know where the water is coming in and where it is going out. And so I think to say that they're polluting into shallow aquifers nearby would be a misstatement slightly. Every dairy cow in production, back to the economics, represents 25,495 in annual economic impact. We have a regional demand for 250,000 cows. That is, processing plants that are being built now are going to be demanding 250,000 cows. And if we wanted to, every single one of them could be built in Minnesota or could be added in Minnesota. If we make the environmental review process insurmountable, that growth and the $1.4 billion in economic activity that it comes with it will move west to the I-29 corridor in neighboring states. We urge you to let farmers figure out the best way to grow their operations rather than eliminating dairy growth through legislative mandates. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Finally, I have Hunter Pedersen. Welcome to the committee. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Fisher. For the record, my name is Hunter Peterson, and I serve as the Public Policy Specialist at Minnesota Farm Bureau Federation. We are a general farm organization with 30,000 family farm and ranch members across the state of Minnesota. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to testify in opposition to House File 3940, legislation that would require an environmental impact statement for livestock projects over 10,000 animal units. As evidenced by the consistent reporting they already do within current regulatory frameworks, farmers and ranchers of every size and shape take their role as environmental stewards seriously. The existing environmental review framework, in our view, already addresses the environmental concerns that come with larger farms. Currently, the Commissioner of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency can already determine whether a formal environmental impact statement is necessary after reviewing the submitted environmental assessment worksheet, EAW. All farms that wish to expand over 1,000 animal units are required to fill out that EAW. And setting a mandatory environmental impact statement precedent for specific farm sizes would deter the future growth of family farms, which often look to expansion as a way to keep the next generations on the farm and in agriculture. We certainly recognize the concerns that come with larger farms in regard to the environment, and we believe in the value of competition in the marketplace. The economic impact and growth, the economic impact of the growth and opportunity that these farms bring to their local communities cannot be understated. The addition of another assessment to an already robust regulatory framework can be hurtful not just to the farms that could possibly expand to this size proposed in the bill, but also to the smaller operations around them. Thank you for the opportunity to voice our concerns about this legislation, and I would ask the committee to oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify to this bill? Seeing none, I will move on to member comments. Chair Heinzman has got some questions for the MPCA. If they'd like to come forward, please. Chair Heinzman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. First of all, I'd just like to know where MPCA is on this, if there's an official position or just a thought that you'd like to share in terms of what we've heard today. And then also, if we could possibly get a ballpark idea of how the process looks under current statute, that would probably be helpful for the committee. My understanding is the process that's being asked for in this language could be triggered by those within the county affected and adjoining counties. I think 100 signatures might be the threshold, if I remember correctly. So if those things could be covered, that'd be great. Thank you.
Assistant Commissioner Vanderbush, go ahead and introduce yourself again and then begin your testimony to answering the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. And again, for the record, I'm Dana Vanderbosch, Assistant Commissioner for Water Policy and Ag at the MPCA. Thank you for the questions. The MPCA doesn't really have a formal position on this bill. We recognize that the legislature can create these new categories for environmental review, and we don't necessarily have a concern or a position on that. I will say the exact number that you would use as the trigger for a new threshold requiring an EIS is difficult to determine, and we don't have a recommendation that would be based on any kind of data. So I think that would be the answer to your first question. And you asked questions that are more procedural, right, about completing an EAW. I'm wondering if those questions are for me or for the Executive Director of EQB.
Chair Heinzman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My recollection, in fact, this would be just last year, is that we could trigger an EIS if 100 Minnesotans that live within the county of the project or an adjoining county, they could submit a petition to the EQB. Now, that was a change that was made in a bipartisan way last year. That was my recollection. I just wanted to make sure that that was pointed out for the record today as we're discussing this bill, because I don't want people to be under the impression that there's no way for us to move from an EAW currently and not have any circumstances that would be available if an EIS was something that was determined to be necessary. So I just wanted to confirm that on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hi, welcome to the committee. If you'd like to introduce yourself and begin answering the question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Catherine Nuschler. I'm the Executive Director of the Environmental Quality Board. So with the environmental review process, any environmental assessment worksheet, when it's completed, at the end of that process, the governmental unit, so for feedlots, the PCA, has to make a decision about whether there should be an EIS completed for the project. And that's based on sort of the type of the environmental effects, to what extent they're subject to mitigation. There's decision criteria laid out in rule. So any EAW can proceed to an EIS if that's determined to be needed based on the rule. The petition process, which as you noted was changed last year, allows for the public with 100 signatures in the county of the project or an adjoining county to petition for an EAW. And then that EAW, if the governmental unit determines is warranted based on the potential for significant environmental effects, would go through the regular process, could proceed to an EIS, but there is no petition directly for an EIS.
Chair Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that testimony. I think it was important for today's discussion on the bill. So I'll hold my comments further till the end.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions for MPCA. Mr. Johnson.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Johnson. Representative Hansen, go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson, if a 10,000 animal unit dairy failed tonight, if a bankruptcy occurred and it failed, who would milk the cows?
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chair and members, if it failed financially,
Yes,
Representative Hanson?
financially.
Mr. Chair, I am not sure who would milk the cows.
Representative Hanson.
Mr. Chair, if a 10,000 cow dairy failed tonight, who would move the manure?
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chair and members, Representative Hanson, so if it failed tonight with absolutely no notice is what you're saying?
Yep.
I have never heard of such an occurrence, Mr. Chair. I don't have much precedent to answer your question.
Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Johnson, when we're looking at, and I want to get into the science, and maybe this is the other staff as well, when you're looking at the application of manure, is it based on N as the limiting factor or P? Is it nitrogen or phosphorus when looking at the land application rates on where the manure is applied?
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chair, I would defer to the Assistant Commissioner.
Assistant Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, Representative Hanson, it's nitrogen is the limit. The rate is based on nitrogen.
Representative Hanson.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And when it's based on nitrogen, there are soils in Minnesota that are naturally high in phosphorus. So the carrying capacity of the phosphorus, if you keep applying the manure, you keep adding to the phosphorus over and over and over. So essentially you get very high phosphorus rates. Is that correct?
Assistant Commissioner.
Chair, Representative Hanson, I'm not sure of the answer to that question.
Representative Hanson.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Johnson, if we were going to create a city of 1 million people, we would require a wastewater system, a drinking water system. We would require treatment for wastewater. We would require the people of that city to pay property taxes and assessments on that in order to build it. Is that correct?
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is correct. I believe there's a mandatory category for EAW for some of those, not necessarily an EIS, Mr. Chair, to the issue at hand.
Thank you. Representative Hanson.
And Mr. Chair and Mr. Johnson, so if let's say you're a city that's growing, a small community, a township, and a city annexes part of the township into their system, they would have to handle that waste, right? They'd be responsible, the property taxpayers would be responsible for that.
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chair and members, I believe if whatever the ratepayers who cover the total cost of the water treatment facility who pay into that system, yes.
Representative Hanson.
And Mr. Chair, just, was in the bonding committee today, been on the tours. Every small town wanting millions of dollars for wastewater, for drinking water, millions and millions. And maybe it's non-point that's actually causing the nitrates or other pollutants that are there. Again, costs that are being asked to be picked up through the Public Facilities Authority or through grants, or some of that 18 billion went to fund some of these projects. So I don't know. Again, it's kind of surprising to have the industry come here and say, get big or get out. It's the only way. And don't change that $10,000. 10,000 animal units today is 1,000 from 30 years ago. So I guess 100,000 30 years from now is what our successors will be arguing about. Maybe that's one per state. We just have one big one per state.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johnson.
To your point, Representative Hanson, most of the nitrate is non-point source. I think that is a fair characterization. These feedlots that are permitted and are of this size are considered point source. And it would be more different types of agricultural activities that might be considered non-point source. But I think you're accurate on that piece.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I found it interesting and honestly probably a little bit challenging to ask the person who works in an office in St. Paul what would happen in the case of a unfortunate bankruptcy or failure. So I wanted to ask if a farmer could answer this question. So I wanted to ask if Mr. Sosham was available as a dairy producer.
Mr. Schulstrom, welcome back to the committee. Representative Schultz, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Sostrom. If a large dairy of some size were to fail overnight, what would happen and who would milk the cows?
Mr. Schulstrom.
Mr. Chair and members, while unfortunate and of course something I think none of us would want, this has happened in other states. Typically, they're very integrated with their lenders, and typically it's not an overnight surprise, and they deal with it. If any of you know a good auctioneer, not just an auctioneer, but a good auctioneer, they might be able to take care of it. But this is what happens. Our livestock markets are open every day, and I think I've seen and dealt with and been involved with farm failures of all size, and I don't think anything of this scale or larger wouldn't be dealt with. And I would suspect lenders and farms of this size are more likely to have the contingency plans in place to deal with something like that. But I would not expect overnight is even a possibility due to the controls that they have in place, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Schultz.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And, maybe we'll be able to find that good auctioneer someday. I've heard that we have, a couple hundred that are licensed here in Minnesota. But then beyond that, Mr. Sostrom, if this very unfortunate circumstance were to happen, would there be any risk to the public in a very short-term period of time? And maybe you can outline for the committee what would happen to the manure.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Solstrom.
Mr. Chair and members, Mr. Representative Schultz. So if it's today, for example, we're going to presume that their manure facility is either half full or near full. And if the cows are gone, you would do nothing. You'd figure out where the crops need it and when. And I would think based on the requirements we've heard, you're going to deal with it and apply the nutrients when you need to. That's the beauty of our facilities. I think they have time. They have the measures built in that whatever day of the year this happens, assuming the animals are gone, you could wait. I would say, I'll let MPCA answer if they differ, but you could wait a couple years and those nutrients are going to be good, but the faster you apply it, the better it's going to be for the crops. So I think the first field nearby that would take it, obviously they were planning to use those nutrients per fields, that's why they have a nutrient management plan, would happily take them with record cattle and record fertilizer prices right now. I think this is not an issue. It's going to be an asset the bankers are the lenders are banking on already as credit. But yeah.
Okay. Representative Schultz. Representative Chair Heinzman, final comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I don't have any further questions, Representative Purcell, so don't worry about that. But I do think that this bill coming forward, unfortunately, is very similar to the previous bill in that could make the argument that this is a solution in search of a problem. If it was a widespread issue statewide, let's revisit this. In the meantime, we are proposing yet more regulations for farms, and we have a trend of sorts where we have environmental groups pitted against agriculture. And environmental groups looking for more regulation while farmers are here pleading, begging, please don't do this. And I'm glad we're in the circumstance where we have to come together in a bipartisan way and something to go forward, and this is not going to go forward. Maybe there's a version of something that could get at the concerns being raised today, but I don't think this is the answer, and we've had a good discussion. That's a positive, but it is quite a disruption to have so many folks travel from all over the state to have to come here and make the case that this hurts their industry. I trust them. I believe that they're here advocating with all of our best interests in mind. I'm glad PCA was able to also come and testify. Again, nobody's, at least near as I could tell, from the agency indicating to us that, like I said a moment ago, this is a widespread issue that has to be addressed in this way. And Mr. Chair, I'm thankful that, again, the discussion was had and the bill will be laid over, and we'll move on from there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Heinsman. Final closing comment, Vice Chair Purcell.
Thank you, Chair Fisher. Yes, I would like to thank all of the testifiers. I know the first two testifiers were from agricultural groups in support of my bill, so I don't think that's a fair characterization to pit groups against each other when I do think we are all concerned about water and rural quality of life. I guess I would have more assurances and maybe not feel the need to bring this bill if we still had a citizens board of our MPCA and there was an opportunity for neighbors to be able to take action. So happy to bring that bill back next year as well. I'll just play the hits here. And I agree. I think that just like Mr. Broughton said from AgriGrowth, we need to use science and data, and that's what an EIS does. It doesn't determine what happens. It gets us the science and the data, and it also happens to take in economic conditions as well. But we are the Environment Committee. One thing I just want to touch on, this one producer that is the only company that has animal units in this scale as of yet, didn't do so great when they were doing the agriculture in the desert. There's an $11 million settlement that the state attorney general from Arizona had to fine to Riverview Dairy because of all the neighbors, their town's aquifer and the private aquifers in the area. So I would love to be proactive before this is an even greater problem. We know this is happening now with this proposed expansion. The MPCA will be holding public meeting on Tuesday, April 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Southside Event Center and Reception Hall in Morris, Minnesota, where public comment on the feedlot permit and also this proposed expansion. If you are in that county or in an adjoining county, please, this is the way you can get some more information. And I am grateful for all the time today. Thank you, Chair Fisher.
Vice Chair Purcell renews her motion that House File 3940 as amended be laid over. The bill is laid over as amended.